And I should say good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, it being a UN-focused event with a global audience. Just make sure I cover everyone with the proper salutation. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is a 10YFP sponsored webinar providing you with an opportunity to learn about our organization, the Green Electronics Council. But before we get started, I'd like to give Claire Theobald, who is the Associate Program Management Officer for the 10YFP SPP, a chance to share some information about her program. I'd also like to note that if you have questions, by all means, please do raise your hand using the GoToWebinar feature, and I will unmute you. Once we get into our full presentation, we will stop periodically to ask people if they have questions. So you will have a chance to ask any questions you might have or make any comments you might want to have. So to start, Claire, with that, I'd like to hand over the reins to you. And as you need to move your slides forward, please just let me know, okay?
Okay, thank you, Jonathan, for the introduction, and welcome everyone to this 10YFP webinar. As Jonathan has mentioned, I'm Claire Thibault, and I'm the Associate Program Officer working on the 10YFP Sustainable Public Procurement Program. So as you may already know, the Green Electronics Council became a partner of the 10YFP SPP program very recently. And it is within this framework that we invite you today to take part in this webinar, during which Jack will be presenting, among other things, their EPEAT program, as well as their work with the informal sector to address e-waste in India, and the definition of sustainability benefits of cloud computing. But before giving them the floor, I'd like to say a few words to give you a bit of background on the 10YFP and on the SPP program in particular. Jonathan, yeah, thank you. So what is the 10YFP? It is the 10-year framework of programs on sustainable consumption and production patterns. Pretty long name, so we usually refer to it as the 10YFP. And it is an outcome of the Rio +20 Summit on Sustainable Development, and it's basically a global framework that with different objectives, including the enhancement of international cooperation to accelerate the shift towards sustainable consumption and production in both developed and developing countries. Among others, it provides capacity building as well as technical and financial assistance to developing countries. Next slide, please. So 6 programs actually constitute the 10YFP. The consumer information one, the one called Sustainable Lifestyles and Education, our program, the Sustainable Public Procurement, the Sustainable Buildings and Construction, and also the Sustainable Tourism Program, and last but not least, the Sustainable Food Systems Program. So you can find online details on those 6 programs. Please feel free to visit our webpage to learn more about the 5 other programs. But today I will focus on the 10YFP SPP program, which is led by UN Environment with 2 co-leads, which are ICLE, the network of local government for sustainability, as well as KT, the Korea Environmental Industry and Technology Institute. So the SPP program has basically 2 objectives. The first one is to build the case for sustainable public procurement. That is improving knowledge on SPP and its effectiveness as a tool to promote greener economies and sustainable development. The second objective is to basically support the implementation of SPP on the ground. And I will explain you in a few slides what we put in place to achieve those 2 goals. What is important to remember is that the SPP program is a global multi-stakeholder platform. really, it's not just a UN environment-led program, it's much more than that. And next slide, please. You'll see on the map the regional distribution of the SPP partners of the SPP program. So you can see that as of February 2017, we had 102 partner organizations as well as 10 individual experts. You can see they are well spread around the globe, but also the nature of our partners is very diversified, including government organizations, international organizations, but also NGOs, individual experts, consultancy firms, a private sector business as well. So this is really the essence of the SPP program, is to gather a large range of different actors in order to advance the case of sustainable public procurement. Next slide, please. So this is in a nutshell the work plan of the SPP program for the biennium 2016-17. So you can see that the program is based on 4 main areas of work. The first one is implementing SPP on the ground. Yeah, just a quick intro on this slide is that the green boxes mark the active working groups, while the yellow one shows the ongoing, pre-launch working group, if I may say so. Basically, we're in the process of putting them together. So actually, I could have mentioned before that the SPP program work is based on those working groups, with a variety of partners taking the lead of each of the working groups, and the membership of this working group is also based on the SPP partners. So for the first stream implementing SPP on the ground, we've got one active working group, the working group 1A, led by ICLE, on SPP tender implementation and impact monitoring. The area, the second one, on assessing implementation and impacts, I'd like to raise your awareness on the group 2D, which is in the process of being set up. It is led by UN Environment, and its objective includes the measurement of the Sustainable Development Indicator 12.7. The third area of work is the identifying obstacles and innovative promoting solutions. So we've got 3 working groups being set up, including one on promoting gender equality through SPP. And last but not least, especially in the case of our guest speaker today, the Green Electronics Council, the area number 4, collaborating with the private sector. So we are identifying potential leaders for the working group 4D, aiming at developing purchasing guidance for priority sectors. Next slide, please. Yes, so that's the 4 main work areas I've already talked about, so we can move to the next slide. Thanks, Jonathan. Yes, the SPP program also runs core activities, including the management of the global SCP clearinghouse. If you do not have yet your login details in order to access the clearinghouse, I do encourage you to log into the website and get a login and password in order to access a huge database of potential resources on sustainable public procurement that are shared by all our partners worldwide. We also organize on a regular basis webinars such as this one, the one of today, and I'd like to say a few words on the global reports that we periodically publish on the the global review on the implementation of sustainable public procurement. The first edition was back in 2013, and we should be able to publish the next edition of the 2016 Global Review on SPP this month, actually, in the next few weeks. So of course we'll share the news with you once it's out. But I do encourage you to review it once it is available from the SCP Clearinghouse. Next slide, please. Yes, the SPP program outputs include also a number of publications, reports, studies that we publish on a regular basis, always available from the SCP Clearinghouse. As I said, the 2016 Global Review on SPP. Earlier in 2016, we also published the Monitoring SPP Implementation guidelines. So I do encourage you to browse our SCP Clearinghouse to use these useful resources. Next slide, please. Yeah, well, actually, that's the last one. So that was, in a nutshell, really, what is the 10-way FP and what's the SPP program is about. If you have any question or if you'd like to know how you could engage with the network, please do not hesitate to contact me. You can see on the screen my email address. I'm now going to give the floor to the Green Electronics Council representatives that are present today. So the webinar is scheduled to last approximately an hour and a half. And we have today with us online Nancy Gillis, who is the CEO of Green Electronics Council, Melanie Bauer, the EPEAT Program Director, as well as Jonathan Rifkin. You've heard of him already, who is the Director of Strategic Partnerships. Please, Jonathan, I'm giving you back the floor.
Thank you very much. Bear with me while I switch over our slides. All right, very good. And I guess to start, I guess we'll do some introductions. Thank you so much for that. It really is a wonderful program, and we're so glad to be a part of it. So yes, as was mentioned just a moment ago, if you have questions, we will stop at some point during the presentation to address those questions. So just put your hand up using the GoToWebinar feature, and we will get to that question when the appropriate time in the presentation comes. So to start, we'll give some introductions, and I will start with Nancy.
Yes, thank you very much all for participating in this webinar. My name is Nancy Gillis, and I am the CEO of the Green Electronics Council. I come to this organization from Ernst & Young, where I was the lead for global supply chain resiliency and responsibility. And prior to that, I did work for the U.S. federal government in the area of procurement, seeking to actually include sustainability criteria both on products being procured by the U.S. government as well as on suppliers. I'm very thankful to be joined by two of my colleagues from the organization, so now let me turn the introductions over to Melanie Bauer.
Yes, hello everyone. Melanie Bauer. I'm the EPEAT Program Director, and in that role I'm responsible for ensuring that the EPEAT program and the eco-label that we run meets the needs of both purchasers and manufacturers who participate in our system. We'll be talking more about the EPEAT program and our eco-label throughout this presentation.
Thank you very much. And I should note that my colleagues Nancy and Melanie are working on Pacific time for the United States, which means it is very early for them. I am functioning on Eastern time, and as I mentioned, my name is Jonathan Rifkin. I'm Director of Strategic Partnerships for the Green Electronics Council, and just a little bit about my experience. Before I came to GEC, I worked as a public purchaser for 10 years. I worked for Washington, D.C. nation's capital in their public procurement office. And while I was there, I developed and maintained the city's Sustainable Purchasing Program. Now, as a member of GEC, I work with organizations like UNEP and through great programs like the 10YST to find common ground between themselves and GEC, and then I help to manage those relationships. All right, so let's move forward. All right, so just a little bit about today's presentation. We're going to be sharing information about the Green Electronics Council, give you a feel for who we are, provide you an overview of GEC's flagship program, EPEAT. We'll be talking about trends in sustainable procurement in the ICT sector, and also efforts that GEC is pursuing to address some of the more pressing challenges that we all face today. So we'll go ahead and move on to the next slide now and get started.
So who is the Green Electronics Council? As you can tell, the Green Electronics Council is US-based. We do, though, have global impact through the EPEAT program, which Melanie will be talking about a little bit later in this presentation. We are a mission-driven nonprofit founded approximately 10 years ago. Our vision is to create a world in which there are only sustainable IT products, and we seek to achieve that vision by influencing the design, manufacture, and procurement of IT products. We're known for our flagship program, EPEAT, which is the leading eco-label used within the ICT sector today. As was stated, EPEAT is a trusted eco-label covering ICT products. The EPEAT criteria cover the product life cycle. They are developed through a voluntary consensus process that includes both government, nonprofits, OEMs, academia. We feel that this is essential to make sure that both the perspectives of those who make products, i.e. the manufacturers, and those who seek to make sure that they are sustainable products, the nonprofits and academia, and those who are then responsible for buying the products, the purchasers, that all of their concerns and interests are represented. The EPEAT system is a trust but verify, and the EPEAT system offers a free searchable online registry of credible sustainable products. Now, I'll turn this over to Melanie to talk a little bit more on this slide about what trust but verify means, and to also highlight the fact that many individuals understand labels as being consumer focused. The EPEAT label is not consumer focused. Instead, we are focused on institutional purchasers. So we work with institutional purchasers both in the private and public sector. Melanie?
Thank you, Nancy. So as Nancy said, there are several aspects of the EPEAT system that distinguish us from other eco-labels. One is the way in which we set our standards through a voluntary consensus process that brings together different stakeholders to determine the criteria that are used in our standards. The other is our assurance process, and for those who aren't familiar with technical terms like assurance, that is really everything that goes on behind the scenes to ensure that purchasers can have confidence in the EPEAT label and that we are a credible label for purchasers to use as part of the procurement process. We, as Nancy said, do have over 4,000 products in our registry, and we really believe that the wide variety of products that we have available is reflective of the fact that purchasers have put their spend behind credible definitions of sustainable electronics. In other words, purchasers have created a real demand, which has sent a strong signal to the market, to manufacturers, who have in turn made sure that they are making products that meet these credible definitions of sustainability. And we will go on to the next slide to talk a little bit more about what EPEAT actually covers. Currently, we have standards that address PCs and displays, so that includes things like laptops and notebooks, as well as monitors and signage. We have a category for imaging equipment that includes things like printers, copiers, and scanners. And we have a category for television. And within the next year, we will be adding product categories for mobile phones, as well as servers. And in the next slide, I will talk about the criteria that are covered in the standards we use in EPEAT. So as Nancy said, the standards we use in EPEAT are true life cycle standards that cover all environmental impacts of electronic products across their life cycle, from production through use and on to end of life. And I'll talk briefly about some of the environmental impacts that we cover. There are restrictions on hazardous substances to make sure that there aren't hazardous substances that can harm human health and the environment. The standards require that products use recycled material, as well as they require that the materials that go into the products are recyclable themselves. And moreover, the standards recognize that the most sustainable electronic product is one that you don't have to replace. So they include criteria to ensure that products last a long time. They also cover energy use, as well as end of life, which is what happens to products when they're no longer needed. And the standards do include required and optional points to allow for continual improvement. This slide shows the breakdown of the number of required and optional points for each of these subject areas. And next slide, please. So products that are registered in EPEAT do have to meet all of the required criteria in order to be included. And by meeting additional optional criteria, products achieve higher levels, silver and gold. So for each of the standards we use, there are anywhere from 23 to 33 required criteria and 26 to 29 optional criteria that might be met.
Okay, thank you, Melanie. So now that we know just a little bit more about how EPEAT works, I'd like to tell you about who specifically is using EPEAT. Well, for one, I used EPEAT. I was a public purchaser for 10 years, as I mentioned, and built and maintained a sustainable purchasing program for Washington, D.C. And why did I use EPEAT? I used it because of its simplicity. I used it because of its credibility. It's been around for 10 years, been tested, and it was widely utilized and is widely utilized across all levels of government and across sectors. I think that my experience was indicative of many purchasers. EPEAT's uptake is certainly apparent, as evidenced through its adoption in large federal contracts, but also through its use in the 50 states. An indicator of this widespread adoption is seen through EPEAT's use in large cooperative agreements that are often used by the states. For those who don't know, cooperative agreements are basically aggregate tenders that are organized by public entities, and they result in multi-billion-dollar contracts. And EPEAT is required in some of those contracts, one for imaging equipment and another for PCs and displays, which is valued at $2.6 billion. As mobile phones is launched as one of our new product categories, we expect to also pursue inclusion in that contract, which might be worth as much as $6 billion. So you can see a lot of uptake. EPEAT's definitely had a lot of success in the public arena, but it's also worth noting that in the last year, more than 50% of our uptake has been in the non-public sector, in areas like finance, healthcare, higher education, and hospitality. More than 300 universities in the U.S. specify EPEAT. Also, some of the largest hospitality chains. I think we can all agree that if you've been in a hotel room, there's probably a TV there. And as Melanie mentioned earlier, TVs is one of our product categories. So with that, Melanie, if you can tell us a little bit about how EPEAT and GPP may overlap.
Sure. So as Jonathan has described, EPEAT has had great success in working with institutional purchasers, and we have been looking to understand how EPEAT might be used as part of procurement in the EU. And we've looked at the Green Procurement Guidelines, and what we see is that GPP and subject matter and the EPEAT subject matter do align. They both cover things like energy use, reach, product life extension, and end of life. And we see that the GPP criteria, the core criteria, and EPEAT are, although not identical, similar enough so that the core criteria in the GPP are all covered by EPEAT. And what we understand from the European Commission that purchasers may be able to use the GPP criteria in contracts, and then tenderers who have EPEAT registered products are effectively fulfilling those contract requirements for sustainable electronics.
So here you see the EPEAT benefits calculator. This is an additional additive.
I apologize, Nancy. I was on mute there.
Program. And sure, as Jonathan will talk to now for a moment, describe why the EPEAT benefits calculator is something that is tremendously valued by the institutional purchasers who have invested in the use of EPEAT in their procurements. As Melanie has talked about, procurements not only in North America, not only in the public sector, but also in the private sector, and now possible in the EU as well. Jonathan?
Thank you, Nancy. Much appreciated. As Nancy mentioned, I think that the EPEAT benefits calculators is one of the reasons why we've been so successful. It allows us to demonstrate the real benefit that results from use of our registered products. I also think it's one of the ways that we differentiate ourselves from many other eco-labels out there, because we can translate the purchase of a specific product into something that the end user, your leadership, and the public can understand in a clear way. I think the slide here is a great way to demonstrate the impact of the benefits calculator and EPEAT registered products. The slide demonstrates the avoided environmental impact across the product life cycle. Products for more than 868 million EPEAT registered products purchased in between 2006 and 2014. There's some statistics on the slide, but I think that statistic in particular is also telling in terms of the level of uptake that EPEAT has enjoyed. Just walking through this slide, you can see just one or two examples. It shows enormous reductions in areas of use of GHGs or emission of GHGs, use of electricity, and solid waste. To those in Paris, we would once again like to apologize that we used Eiffel Towers as a way to demonstrate avoided toxic waste, but it does put into perspective the enormous environmental impact that are avoided by use of EPEAT registered products.
So before we progress to the second portion of our presentation, which as you can tell focuses on the trends that we've been seeing in the sustainable procurement of ICT products, we wanted to recap the discussion we've just had about EPEAT. Again, we are from the Green Electronics Council, mission-driven organization, global, even though based in the United States. And our flagship program is the EPEAT label. It is one in which it's a three-tier system, as Melanie had spoke about. And the two great values that institutional purchasers find in our EPEAT label is first and foremost the availability of going online and easily finding the products within the product categories that we've highlighted that meet credible criteria of sustainability. And then these institutional purchasers then know exactly what is available and it's 4,000 plus products. So for those who think that there's not enough opportunity in getting innovative products that are both innovative in their use of technology or how users can use them, that would be a false assumption. There are many both innovative products that are also sustainable. We also then offer, as Jonathan spoke about, the benefits calculator. Any institutional purchaser who procures EPEAT registered products is able to contact us, and we are more than happy to do a benefits calculation. And of course, these benefits calculation, as was talked about, not only talk about primary environmental impacts, but we can also compute cost savings. So these are the online EPEAT registry and the EPEAT-related benefits calculation are two very significant value adds that we believe the EPEAT program provides to institutional purchasers globally. So before we go into this trends conversation, are there any questions by those participating here on this webinar about GEC and or the EPEAT program?
If you have a question, please just raise your hand using the GoToWebinar feature and I will unmute you. Give everybody a second. Okay. Well, if there are no questions right now, that's fine. But if you do think of any, by all means, please raise your hand. We'll certainly take some more questions at the end of the presentation.
And thank you. Let's move on to the second portion of our webinar, which is a focus on the trends that the Green Electronics Council is seeing as we engage with the institutional purchasers, both in the public and the private sector. What's interesting now is that previously, many institutional purchasers were focused predominantly on the environmental impacts of IT products. We increasingly see that purchasing criteria continue to focus on environmental, but now actively seek to really lead to a triple bottom line estimation, to where environmental impacts, economic or the cost of the product, and now social impacts are equally weighted. This is a change from a trend that we had seen where sustainability was really, by purchasers, seen predominantly as environmental and not inclusive of social. We also increasingly see that institutional purchasers have an expectation of increased transparency in supply chains. This transparency is not just understanding what suppliers at tier 2s or 3s are doing, it also is reflected in institutional purchasers actually increasing their collaboration with their suppliers, seeking not only to have that transparency, but to also influence supplier behavior. This again is something that we hadn't seen to this extent in the last 2 to 3 years. Another point that we're seeing is that there's as much focus on indirect IT spend and organizational sustainability reporting as there is direct. So for those organizations who utilize GRI or CDP, these two organizations are starting to look at not just direct spend, which is the spend that is spent on products and services to make your own products and services, but also the indirect spend, the money that organizations spend to get those IT products that make their organization run. Here we're seeing a desire by organizations to have their indirect spend also be recognized as part of GRI or CDP reporting. And I'm pleased to state that the Green Electronics Council is involved with both organizations to assist in capturing the environmental impacts of indirect spend. On item 4, we're starting to see, as many of you might, a focus not just on the individual products themselves, but basically the aggregation of those products. By that I mean a recognition that we're increasingly living in a networked world. I'm sure that you see a number of newspaper articles about the Internet of Things. We've recently went to the Mobile World Congress in Barcelona that focused on connectivity, mobile connectivity between devices. And examples here are refrigerators that are in kitchens that recognize through sensors when a product is missing, of course communicates the need for that product both to the store where you would have bought it, and then to yourself to let you know it's time to pick up that product. So what we increasingly see is this aggregation of use of IT products in network, and purchasers grappling with how does one think about the sustainability of the networked world. Can one define sustainability of a network, or, as we'll talk about a little bit later, something akin to a network, cloud computing? And then we see, as I said earlier, since criteria now not only reflect the environmental and the cost considerations, but also the social impacts of products, there are specific social concerns that we see mentioned more frequently by institutional purchasers. One of them is chemicals, and here not only the chemicals within the product, so the concern about the chemicals and their impact on the end user, but also the chemicals that are used as part of the IT product manufacturing process and how those chemicals may influence worker safety. We hear a lot about continuing labor issues, and by that we see emphasis on human trafficking, child labor, and also sexual exploitation of workers within the IT sector. And then lastly, we're very interested in seeing this continuation of the focus on gender or women-led suppliers as part of a company's supplier diversification program. Many companies understand that their supply chain is at risk if they only have one type of supplier as part of it. With the introduction of the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, we see organizations blending the focus of the SDG and gender into their supplier diversification plans. And so an emphasis on increasing gender representation not only in the brand companies themselves, but also throughout their supply chain. So here are a number of trends that we see in the sustainable procurement of ICT products. This is some research that we are doing because in June of this year, the Green Electronics Council will be launching its first State of Sustainable ICT Products. It's a report that we will be putting out, and we'll actually be launching it in June at the CES Asia event as part of our Catalyst Awards award ceremony. If you're interested in the Catalyst Awards that the Green Electronics Council also sponsors, please don't hesitate to look on our website. So let me pause here. Any questions about some of these trends that we're recognizing that institutional purchasers are reflecting?
Once again, if you have a question, please raise your hand using the GoToWebinar feature.
Thank you. And if you are interested in receiving a copy of the Green Electronics Council State of Sustainable ICT products, please don't hesitate to email us, and we will make sure that you are notified once the report is available. Again, that report will be launched June 8th at the event CES Asia, which is the event that is hosting the Green Electronics Council and allowing us to have our Catalyst Awards award ceremony there.
Very good. Okay, so the final, I'm going to kick off the final portion of our presentation. We've talked a lot about the benefits of the EPEAT program and the specific benefits that it provides in the product categories in which we have products, mainly PCs and displays, imaging equipment, TVs, and soon mobile phones and servers. We recognize that though the specific product categories that EPEAT covers are important, the ICT universe is far larger. GEC aims to identify other areas of importance to purchasers, and it tries to fill the gaps and provide solutions for those challenges that emerge. And we're going to finish up the presentation by talking about some of our efforts in 3 important areas. We'll talk about ways that GEC is helping purchasers to make more socially responsible decisions across the supply chain when procuring ICT products. We'll talk about ways that we can incentivize purchasers to utilize cloud computing and understand the inherent environmental benefit that results from that decision. And we'll talk about a few initiatives we have, or an initiative we are developing in India, which is meant to help countries with less developed infrastructure to address end-of-life concerns. So with that, I'll pass us off. Melanie.
Thank you. I'll say a few words about our project to address social impacts within ICT supply chains. And again, this comes out of a recognition that Nancy described, which is that institutional purchasers who are seeking to ensure that they are doing sustainable procurement want to address both environmental as well as social impacts in the products that they are purchasing. And this project grew out of a recognition that purchasers are seeking to address the social impacts of ICT products that they are procuring. But in many cases, we're not really sure how to go about that. There are many complex social issues throughout the ICT supply chain, including, as Nancy alluded to, things like trafficking, as well as forced and bonded labor. Purchasers were seeking to address those types of issues, but often in a way that was not really effective. We also understood from the manufacturer side that they were often getting questionnaires from purchasers that were slightly different. Sometimes purchasers were not asking the right questions, or were asking them to supply evidence that was not something that they had readily available. So our project seeks to create what we're calling a harmonized set of purchaser questions that purchasers can use to identify products that are made in a supply chain that is socially responsible. And what we intend to do is really work on both sides, understanding what purchasers are attempting to address through the procurement of ICT products, and working also with manufacturers to understand the work that they are already doing to address social impacts in their supply chain. An important output of this will be giving purchasers guidance on the types of verification evidence that they can and should request from their suppliers to ensure that when they're asking questions about social impacts in ICT supply chains, that they're getting credible evidence from their suppliers that these types of impacts are being addressed.
Thank you, Melanie. So an additional project that the Green Electronics Council is supporting is sustainability through cloud computing. As was mentioned, the Green Electronics Council has a mission of seeing only sustainable ICT products. But it's also understood that even though we have our EPEAT program as our flagship program, that there are now changes within technology that if we want to see this vision of only sustainable ICT products within the world, we need to address additional challenges that EPEAT does not. One of these is the transition by many organizations to the utilization of cloud computing services. Now, I'd like to be able to say that as institutional purchasers make the decision about cloud computing services, that they're actively looking towards whether or not those services are sustainable. But that's not the case. Purchasers continue to be influenced by criteria such as the security of the cloud computing service, the uptime, the resiliency, and other factors. Sustainability at this juncture really is not an influencing criteria, as institutional purchasers make decisions about cloud computing. So then why is the Green Electronics Council focused on cloud computing, and how are we? Well, our analysis has already shown that organizations who make the decision to transition from an internal-driven data center to high-performing cloud computing services are intrinsically more sustainable. So if we'd like to further sustainability, we as an organization would like to have institutional purchasers increasingly make the decision towards cloud computing services. To help facilitate that, a project that we are doing is now called Sustainability Through Cloud Computing. We're focusing on identifying the sustainability performance criteria of cloud computing services, and we're doing that to be able to develop a benefits calculator that's specific to cloud computing services. And here, what we're seeking to do is, for those purchasers who are investing in cloud computing services, again, predominantly because of other criteria, usually driven to the security, the uptime, and the cost savings that cloud services can provide, that we're actually able to help those purchasers make an argument that there are inherent sustainability gains. And that through this, we hope to see a movement towards cloud services, but also with the clarity of what makes cloud services sustainable, we hope to increase the transparency of the information that cloud service providers put out. So this is our initiative of sustainability through cloud computing. Melanie?
Yes, I believe that the next slide is me. I see it, sorry. So in addition to the initiatives that we've just described, we are also working to address end-of-life issues in the developing world. The standards that we currently use in EPEAT, as I've described, do address product end-of-life. However, in conversations with stakeholders in other parts of the world, we've come to understand that these end-of-life criteria were developed from a very US and EU-based perspective that assumes the presence of infrastructure and regulations around end-of-life that ensure that products, especially products like electronics, are handled safely at their end-of-life. And what we learned was that in developing economies, that infrastructure is often not present. There's a large informal sector that works to dismantle products at their end of life, often doing so using processes that present harm to both human health and the environment. The challenge with using standards like EPEAT in these developing economies is that the end-of-life criteria are really challenging for informal collectors and processors to meet. So there's essentially a gap between what is required in the standards and the actual end-of-life processing reality on the ground in places like India. So we are exploring ways that we can address this gap through the creation of a standard that deals specifically with ICT products in India that has different end-of-life requirements that take into consideration the context in India. We'll be working with local stakeholders, and this will be an Indian standard for Indian products. And the end-of-life criteria in the standard will ensure that the informal sector that is largely engaged in end-of-life processing continues to have access to this viable livelihood that end-of-life processing provides to them. And in doing so, we see the standard as a way to ensure that electronics are handled safely at their end of life in India, while also helping manufacturers meet sustainable development goals on things like ensuring safe and decent work.
So here you see that there are 3 additional projects that were referenced. The Green Electronics Council is tremendously excited to be supporting and working in conjunction with projects and programs as the 10-year program that is hosting us today. I think it's tremendously impactful what institutional persons do when they make a choice for sustainable ICT products versus non-sustainable ICT products, which is why the Green Electronics Council is so proud to also have EPEAT as our flagship program. So let me turn it over to Jonathan in case there are any questions that participants might have about our presentation.
Thanks, Nancy. And once again, if there are any questions, please do raise your hand using the GoToWebinar. If questions occur to you perhaps at a later date, we do have our contact information available to you, and please reach out to any of us directly. We'll be happy to answer any questions you have and anything that you felt need expanding upon. All right. Well, once again, feel free to raise your hand using the GoToWebinar, but in the absence of questions, we can certainly offer our thanks to all of you for sitting in today and hopefully learning something about GEC. And thanks again to the 10YSP SCP for allowing us to participate and contribute to the conversation. We are thrilled and excited to be a member of this great organization and this great initiative. So thank you very much all. Also, one last thing is we have been recording this, so I'm going to provide that file to Claire, and if it's possible to post it publicly, we can do that as well.
Yes, thank you, Jonathan, for sharing the file, and yes, we will circulate it and make it available. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Claire, and thanks all who have participated, regardless of what time zone you might find yourself in. Very appreciated.
All right. Have a great day, everybody.
With that, we're closing the webinar. Thanks so much.